in Tasmania as part of the Australia-ASEAN Academics Forum. Last night or yesterday was absolutely fantastic, with some really interesting research going on in the teaching and learning space and online education. So we had two really great presentations yesterday, and I know today you're going to enjoy our two presentations equally as much as we did yesterday. And today we are welcoming Tracy Douglas, Alison James and Kerry Mather with their topic, Reimagining the Role of Discussion Boards to Engage Richly Diverse Students and Improve Graduate Success. And we welcome Marlizayati Binti, Johari and Siti, Noor Binti and Haji Abdul Latif with their presentation entitled A Survey-Based Study for Assessing the Wellbeing of Educators at the University Brunei Darussalam in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. And I'll be chairing these two sessions on behalf of the organising committee, and am looking forward to both of them very much. The biographies of our presenters are attached in the brochure. However, a couple of quick words. Tracy Douglas is first year coordinator and senior lecturer in the School of Health Sciences and Deputy Associate Dean, Student Engagement and Retention in the College of Health and Medicine at UTAS. Alison James is senior lecturer at the Australian Maritime College, and Dr. Kerry Mather is in the Australian Institute of Health Services and Management at the University of Tasmania, and she's a registered nurse, senior lecturer, and has worked in the health sector for over 30 years. I'm sorry if I haven't done people justice. I'm sure there's lots more detail there in the brochure. Without any further ado, I shall hand over to Tracy, Alison, and Kerry for their presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. And Vin said she could see our presentation, so I assume that's correct at the moment.
Yeah, looks great. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Tracy Douglas, and I have with me Ali James and Kerry Mather. So I will start off the presentation, and then Ali will give some of the presentation from her particular context. And we've got Kerry here to basically monitor the chat. So we really do encourage you to pop any comments or questions as we go through the chat. We've got a few links in our presentation as well, and so Kerry will pop those in as well. So as our title suggests, we are talking about online discussion boards, and it's certainly something that we have done a lot of research in over a number of years. So we are academics from the Health and Maritime disciplines at the University of Tasmania, and we're all based in Launceston, which is in the northern part of the state of Tasmania in Australia. We teach first year students and final year students and also postgraduate students, and all of our student cohorts, probably like a lot of yours, are very diverse. So they come from a lot of different educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, life experience backgrounds, ages, etc. And so it's really important that we address that diversity of our student cohorts when we're actually teaching them, particularly in the online space. Here at the University of Tasmania, we have a blended delivery of curriculum. So we deliver a lot of content online, but for a lot of our units, then we have our students on campus, where we also have some active learning activities. So it's important in that online space that we have content, but we also have interactivity and active learning occurring. And for some of our units, they are fully online. And so that's where interactivity online becomes really important, as well as that online presence between the student and the teacher. And that's something that we think is just so important to ensure that students have a positive learning journey. So what we do want to ask, just to start with, is whether you use or have used online discussion boards in learning and teaching. So in the Zoom platform, there's a little reactions button. And so if you can press green for yes or red for no, it'll just give us an idea from the actual people that we have here who actually has used discussion boards. So we can see a few green ticks appearing, which is great. There's one red one. Okay, so we can see that there are quite a few of you who have used or are currently using online discussion boards in learning and teaching, which isn't overly surprising because often in our learning management systems, it is one of the communication tools that's available to us. Okay, so why are we interested in online discussion boards? Well, back in 2015, we were part of a professional learning circle that was interested in e-learning. And as we had our discussions initially as a group, we found that one thing that we all had in common was that we had online discussion boards, but we often weren't using them to their full ability. And in some units where they were being used for assessment, there were some issues with the way they were being delivered and also assessed. So we recognised this as an opportunity to scaffold learning and really enrich interactive learning in that online space. And so we really were focusing again on how teachers as well as students were present in an asynchronous environment online. So what we decided to do was set up a project. We surveyed and interviewed staff and students across a range of units, which are essentially subjects at the University of Tasmania. And from the results of that particular survey and interviews, we established that there was a real need for a guide for how to use discussion boards, how to set them up, how to use them effectively. There were lots of guides out there, but there wasn't one that really fitted the context of the University of Tasmania. So we applied and received a teaching development grant from the university, and that enabled us to develop the guide. So what did we find from students? We asked students about a range of things, so we're just going to talk about a little bit about what we found out initially. But essentially, when we talked to them about, were they engaged in discussion boards, certainly they did find that there were things that were quite positive about some of the discussion boards where they were asked to do a task like answer a question or some sort of kind of riddle, as it indicates here for anatomical positioning. When they're asked to discuss something that had, various views, that was often very engaging. And certainly they could identify that discussion boards were really useful to ask questions and discuss possible answers. And so therefore it was more interactive than learning straight from textbook. However, students did not like it when we assessed them using our discussion boards, and that was possibly because of the way they were being assessed. They found that it was more of a tick the box and a hassle for them to do that. And some students just didn't find discussion boards engaging. One thing we were very aware of when talking to the students and getting their thoughts was that facilitation could sometimes be an issue. And so facilitation is often done by staff who may be casuals or sessional staff, as well as staff who are permanently employed by the university. And it was very spasmodic as to whether the facilitation was working or not with the discussion boards. So students certainly indicated that there needed to be more presence from the facilitators. They needed to steer the topics, stop the topics going off track. They needed to be active from week one and just present more often in that online space. They also didn't like referencing their discussion posts. Now, sometimes if we're using discussion boards as an assessment piece, it may be a requirement that they reference. But again, they couldn't always see the value of referencing. And so this was something that we thought was important to address. So we developed our online discussion board guide. The online discussion board guide is available through the University of Tasmania website, and it's actually available to people not only within our university, but outside of our university. It's an interactive guide, and we look to continually build and improve it in time. It discusses the purpose of online discussion boards, and then it takes you through learning design, etiquette, so how to communicate correctly in that online platform, engagement and facilitation, how to use them for assessment effectively, how to review and evaluate the effectiveness of discussion boards, and we provide a useful checklist which includes tips and tricks. So Kerry will pop the link to that in the chat box if you want to go and have a look at our actual guide later. What we did find when we developed the guide and we had it live around 2019 is that there was uptake from the guide, obviously within our university, but also externally. And when COVID hit and people were online and obviously looking at how they can make their learning management systems more effective, we saw a huge increase in the number of users of our guide globally. So we had interaction from Asia, Europe, North America, and also Africa, as well as throughout Australia and New Zealand. So we've certainly been able to demonstrate through Google Analytics that our guide has been a useful tool for a number of individuals globally. So what did the students here find once we had the guide available for our staff to use, and therefore we're using some of the tips and tricks that we'd given them in that guide to hopefully improve their discussion boards? Our students gave us much more positive feedback. They really enjoyed the online community because they found their facilitators were there more constantly and they were engaging with them. They really enjoyed reading the opinions from other students as well as sharing their opinions, really challenged and really could identify that they were consolidating their learning in this online environment. And the topics that they had were really opening up their eyes to the discipline that they were actually studying. And they liked the fact that the facilitators were so present, almost they felt like they were there in real time. We also talked to some facilitators after the guide was available, understanding that we now had the guide there for them to support them in their professional development of using online discussion boards. They found that it was much easier to facilitate the discussion boards now they had this resource that they could also refer to. They found if they initiated the conversation each week, that certainly did improve the student engagement. They really could identify that if they could find out when the students would be there and they were mapping their frequency of engagement with that, then they certainly were enabling them to answer all the questions that the students were posting. And it was almost like a real-time tutorial for some of the facilitators. And a lot of the facilitators just were quite amazed at how a lot of the students online, remembering we have diverse cohorts, were engaging differently. And this was a huge learning experience for them. So overall, we certainly identified, not surprisingly, that the facilitators definitely need to be present to ensure successful engagement, and that online discussion boards can support learning in a very safe environment. Facilitators need to be active, so they shouldn't just be kind of looking at the post, but actually participating in the context that they need to be for the particular subject. We can demonstrate from what we've seen in the use of online discussion boards that it does enable active learning, it does accommodate multiple learning styles, and that we can actually scaffold our learning and utilise discipline-specific terminology, and this is transferable to work environments. So what I'll talk about now is how I use discussion boards in first year units, and then I'll hand over to Ali, who will talk about it in final year units and particular current workplace issues. So in a first year unit, I teach anatomy and physiology, and my unit at the moment has about 660 students in, and they are distributed across 4 different campuses. So it's really important that as a huge group that they're able to interact online with the content we provide, as well as using a communication tool like a discussion board. So we use discussion boards as an optional tool, but it enables students to discuss and apply their content, ask questions, and really prompt some independent thinking and application of knowledge by using guided questions in our discussion boards. And certainly we've been able to demonstrate that it does help students to identify gaps in their knowledge and scaffold their learning, as well as using that discipline-specific terminology. So just some examples, I understand there's a lot in these slides, but just to explain to you how we can use these discussion boards effectively. A lot of people use content discussion boards, which are an avenue for students just to ask questions about content. I used to call them, for example, the digestive system discussion board, and students didn't really interact. So we started calling them interesting things like, in this case, digesting your way through CZZ 102, and then pose a few questions that the students might think about when actually studying the content of this system. And we have found that this has enabled students to go in a little bit more often and pose their questions here, and they can do it anonymously, so they feel quite safe doing that in such a big group. So content discussion boards is something we use a lot. I also use a discussion board to help students practice their use of anatomical terminology, which is important in the health discipline. So in this particular way, it's more of a prescribed discussion board in that we encourage students to answer a question and then pose a question. So we can see here that the first posting is your nose is in what position compared to your ears. And so what the student will have to do is answer that question, and they have to answer it using the right terminology. So your nose is medial to your ears is what they might type, and then they might explain what medial means. And then they ask a question for the next student to answer, like in what position is the knee compared to the ankle? And so the next student to go in will answer that question. I found students will repeatedly go into this and just keep practicing the use of their terminology and also correct others' terminology as they're actually answering these very simple questions. So it's just a nice, fun way that you can utilise a discussion board. And then revision, obviously, just posting questions, past exam questions, applied questions, really getting students to think about their knowledge and apply that to a specific scenario. So providing that in a discussion board and then monitoring it and answering the students as they provide some answers and helping them to really craft the correct answers to these types of questions, which really helps them prepare for the final exams. So what do the students think? Well, the students in my units, thankfully, do like discussion boards when they use them. They like having review questions. They like the fact that we're pretty prompt in answering their questions. We ensure that we get notifications when students actually do post to our discussion boards, so that enables us to be very prompt in answering. They love to be able to test their knowledge. And they recognise that although I'm teaching them a unit that is quite content heavy, the discussion boards can help them to really dig deep into that content and get the understanding they require. And they really like the ability to practice using their discipline-specific terminology. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Ali, and Ali's going to now shift to final year units and talk about how she uses discussion boards to prepare them with workplace issues. And part of our discussion, as Ali talks, will also cover the use of artificial intelligence and how we think about that in discussion boards.
Good afternoon. This is the MASK Rainbow Shipping Container, and in 2021 it set off on a world tour and it was celebrating diversity and inclusion. And the idea of this container was, as it came into port or it went on its travel, people would sign the inside of the container as a support for inclusion and diversity. So successful it was. They thought they'd get about 20 people to jump on board with this, but it was so successful, though even the company was overwhelmed. So in 2022, they painted more of them, and these now appear on shipping containers. And you can see the lovely coloured statement that MASK have made with regards to diversity and inclusion. So that got me to thinking, well, how can we actually use discussion boards to harness this diversity and inclusion? So the industry is particularly unique in that it's a global web of shipping when it connects every continent in the world, and it's all about the transport and logistics of commodities. It's the transport of the items we consume, as well as that glamorous cruising industry. So your mind's probably gone to a beach somewhere now, and also to defence services. So it's a rather large and diverse industry that we can harness perceptions from. It's all about supply chain management. It's coordinating that efficiency of logistics activities from the source to the end user. So really from the paddock to the courier that knocks on your door of that parcel, that exciting moment of the day. So for example, it's that whole process of how our Tasmanian wine and apples arrive, say, in the United States and Singapore. So what we really have there is a networked industry from different national, ethnic, religious and cultural backgrounds, and it provides us with wonderful opportunities to design our teaching for graduate success within that industry. So thinking about the diversity of the industry and what that can bring to our discussion board or our discussion table, we have a vibrancy of opportunities and perspectives that we can use to scaffold. And what we mean by that is build the learning, directly applying industry examples and tasks. And we'll come back to that MASK example again a little later on. Discussion provides a gateway, if you like, to engage diversity. And it's really a nuanced conversation because it can go backwards and forwards, and you can direct the discussion to things that are prevalent to the industry at the time. So a clear facet of this industry is that it's a multicultural, multilingual aspect. And how can we use discussion to harness and help as a teaching strategy? If we think about it compared to a traditional lecture, which is delivered in a traditional sense, you know, in an hour, and students are writing things down, and if English isn't your first language and English is your target language, then a lot can be lost in that lecture for that type of student. So a vast number of our students are in this position. English is not their first language. So what the discussion does for us is give us a more fluid, it's capable of ongoing design, and it can be of greater assistance to the student than getting one big chunk of a lecture, and we can do it in bite-sized pieces. With it being asynchronous, it's an opportunity for someone to think in their second language, a time to clarify, to go back. If they don't understand something, I've got time to go back and clarify. Where the traditional lecture, that's gone, I've got to write it down and try and scramble to see what it was about. And we can appreciate the topic in much smaller portions. It's short and it's less formal. It's a chance to write in the target language, to understand and discuss and explain. So it's doing more than just teaching and assessing. It's also got a side bonus of assisting people who aren't necessarily studying in their first language, which is a big component of our faculty. So the next generation of shipping leaders are really focused on sustainability and diversity. So we think about it as educators, focusing on that sustainability and diversity needs a tiered solution. And that involves the industry overall and us as educators designing our teaching and assessment to build in that diversity and create a work readiness for students when they graduate. And it involves organisations like the MASC, who give us the examples of how to do that, and the individuals within the industry. So really it's about navigating our future. It's about boosting diversity and having an inclusive workforce across the industry. We can use discussion boards to discuss those types of topics, but bring in many different ideas and perspectives. So it's really about, a bit like the MASC approach, supporting tolerance and inclusion, and engagement is critical both for the industry and the educators. So we want to work out how we can use the people in our classes to educate across the class. I'll give you an example from one of my units. It's Strategic Management in Network Industries. It's a final undergraduate unit. It has both on-campus and distance cohorts, very geographically dispersed across the globe. Some are industry employed, and most of the distance students are industry employed. So by now we're beginning to think we can take the idea of those people already working in the industry and in fact use their experience to build into the discussion board and get answers that are helpful for those students that are enrolled in the course as, say, school leavers and going to looking for more knowledge of the industry to get a realistic position on what the industry is like. We generally tend to do an initial and reply post. They post one initial post and then they have to reply to another student's post. I facilitate those discussions, so I direct them, and generally speaking, for example, an on-campus student might pose a question, then I might go into the facilitation and then ask a distance students if they can post something that directly relates to what they're doing in their work at that particular time. So it's facilitated and assessed. So what an example of how we might do educative or authentic activities and scaffolding, and that mirrors industry tasks. Module 2 looks at corporate strategies. Now we've set that up as with examples from the transport and logistics industry, and distance students often use their employer. So we'd ask them to discuss the corporate activities in module number 2 using an example from the industry. So therefore, we're not only getting them to use the unit content, but we're getting them to apply it to the industry. Another industry example we might say is, can you discuss an industry example of an organisation that demonstrates living out their strategic corporate intent? That's module number 3. An example of that would be that MASC shipping container example. They're actually living out what they believe and their belief in diversity. So what we're really doing there is we're scaffolding into other elements of the corporate strategic plan for an industry participant or startup. So we've got 2 modules there that look at the elements of a strategic plan. We're going to use the online discussion to educate and flesh that out. But then later on, the major assessment is to write a complete corporate strategic plan. So we're building and scaffolding as we go. We're introducing unit content, but we're also introducing industry examples to do that. So therefore, from a graduate perspective, we've experienced both the unit content plus some examples from the industry. Then we're actually going to write a strategic plan. We're not just going to talk about it. So we're building up and scaffolding a whole heap of activities that creates something that they can use when they actually leave university. So what we've done here is we've combined a teaching and assessment strategy, which really harnesses the uniqueness of that industry. We're combining unit curriculum and industry application. We're doing authentic activities that assist work readiness, and we're learning from each other. And we're really networking back and forth the discussion. And fresh ideas for industry employers and a realistic look at the industry for school leaders. I've even had this situation in one unit where an employee was looking at a corporate redesign and he wanted some ideas. So the distance student posted and the on-campus class answered and posted that up. So we're learning from each other. So the student voice, do they really like that? So I've just got 4 examples from Evaluate. We love the discussion aspect, allows for interaction and to write about smaller subtopics early, helping you to keep updated. Has placed us all in a comfortable environment to answer the questions and allows us to learn from each other. The assessment method of 2 discussion forum posts was welcome and gave real world examples. And it motivates people. It's jumping. And it motivates people to succeed, giving them every opportunity. So what we really have here is a strategy of small wins, if you like. Success breeds success. So we're biting our way along here in smaller little portions.
Okay, so I guess what we've in recent times then been thinking about as we use discussion boards, and particularly in the context that Ali uses them when we're preparing students to go out to the workplace, is how does artificial intelligence work here? So as Theo Farrell, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for the University of Wollongong says, AI will increasingly become endemic in our work and everyday lives. We shouldn't be scared of it. Instead, we must try to understand and embrace it while constantly re-evaluating the moral and pragmatic implications of this revolutionary technology. So there's been a lot of talk in recent months about artificial intelligence and how it may encourage students to breach academic integrity. What we want to do in discussion boards, though, is look at how artificial intelligence can be used to actually help students learn and help prepare them for what they may need to use artificial intelligence for as they go out into the workforce. So in higher education, we know that artificial intelligence like ChatGPT can generate content, could support essay writing, answer questions, learn a language. It can be your research assistant or it can be your study buddy. Here at the University of Tasmania, one of our colleagues, Brian Eager from the College of Business and Economics, has done a really great YouTube clip on using AI in higher education, which we really encourage you to have a look at, and we'll pop that clip HTML address into the actual chat box for you to use. And it just is a very short presentation where she talks about how we can actually look at AI as a positive thing and how we can encourage students to use it as a really great learning tool. And Ali's done a little bit of brief investigation in this in her work in Maritime College, looking at using discussion boards. So is AI our new study buddy and workmate?
Well, the future work is changing even as we're speaking and even as I type that line. So some of the key issues are, how should we use AI in our classrooms and in discussion as a study buddy or an idea generator and a tutor? And how do we do our jobs and what resources we use to inform our decisions and responses? And they're very much changing. So how do we harness and use that? So example here is back again with the strategic management final year class. What the teaching strategy objectives for this particular experiment I did with using AI was to harness the diversity of both the on-campus class and the distance students via online discussion. I wanted them to be able to articulate how corporate values indirectly impact on organisational control. That uses the unit content from modules 3, 8 and 10. So the answer isn't sitting there in front of them. They can't look it up online. They can't look it up in their notes. They have to be able to think through those modules and conceptualise that answer. And I also wanted them to practice presenting managerial suggestions, and often quickly, which is in industry is a work-life reality. You may have to present very quickly or impromptu some ideas. So can we quickly use AI to do that? And for those of you that have used AI, you probably realise that you can get some answers very quickly. So the task, in an internal on-campus class, we'll go back to mask shipping. They have a value of integrity, which partners with that diversity and inclusion statement that they made by the rainbow shipping container. I put the students into a situation and said, you're a graduate employee at MASK participating in a team strategy review meeting. Your supervisor asks you to bring to the table after lunch 3 ideas of how integrity indirectly impacts on organisational control. The students couldn't answer this off the top of their head, so the plan was to use AI to generate some ideas, and so that's what we did. We popped that into ChatGPT, and then we would continue the face-to-face class with a presentation of what they found, and all this is recorded for the distance students to listen to. So this was the answer from ChatGPT. Very simply, in this case, we asked it, in a bulleted list, provide 3 ideas of how integrity indirectly impacts on organisational control. I did have one group ask a different question, and that gave a long answer, another one that directly gave an answer in the shipping industry. And it's interesting when you compare them, not all answers are correct. This particular answer gave a short, sharp one. So what I did with the students here is you've got building trust, ethical behaviour, reputation and employee calibre. I wanted to teach them how to use it as an idea generator, but then not encourage them to then go and copy it into assessment. So how do we do that? What I did, I said to them, like, read through that, and then I'd like you to write the notes down and just pick the 3 key areas: building trust, ethical behaviour, reputation, employee calibre. Now do a 2-minute impromptu presentation on that without looking at anything from ChatGPT, which is what they did in class. So they practiced doing an impromptu presentation, very quick one, not a lot of time to find the answer, which is an organisational reality of what we have to do when we're in the workforce. Then the students after that, to bring it into the discussion board, typed up their answer. One person from each team typed up the answer and put it on the online discussion post. Then I come in and I facilitate that discussion, asking the distance students to add on with examples from their own work place or perspective. So really what we've done here is we've created scaffolding opportunities for industry relevant conversations. We've combined teaching and assessment together, and we've drawn the different experiences from the distance class into the on-campus class, and the on-campus class have had the benefit of using a new technology and someone coaching them along with that. So we've managed to draw a few things together. There are some considerations that I have found with using AI. In the example I used, we taught our students to generate a corporate style answer in a generic sense, and then we scaffolded with online discussion. If you're going to use that in the workplace, then employees need to be cautious on what they're inputting, because it can be sensitive, confidential workplace information. So when we actually began to put specific workplace information, we didn't normally get the answers that we actually wanted for that presentation. The other thing, and there are numerous things to think about, but the model has a large amount of data, and you've got a question, is that output credible and accurate? In some of the questions I had them put in the longer questions, some of the answers were actually incorrect. The list wasn't correct. In this case, ChatGPT generally only knows world developments up to about 2021. In my example there, it didn't matter whether it was up to date on ideas, because all we're looking at were indirect and control answers, so it didn't really matter. In other situations, though, it does matter how up to date the answers are coming. So as teaching staff, we have to consider our position on AI, whether we utilise it in the classroom or discussion, and to what extent and how you control that.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentation, and we welcome any questions that you have. Obviously, if you'd like to know more about anything we've talked about, a discussion board guide, contact me. Artificial intelligence, contact Ali, she's our guru on that at the moment. And just discussion boards generally, you can always contact Kerry, you can contact any of us about anything. If you're looking at how you can reimagine the role of discussion boards to engage your students. Thank you.
Tracy, Ali, Kerry, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Some absolutely fascinating work in there. I might kick the party off with the question, if that's all right, and hopefully hear from other people. It's really interesting. I was absolutely fascinated to see the way, Ali, you particularly were working with AI in an educative sense and with quite a long-term vision for how they may use it down the track. I'm really interested in this notion of authentic assessment as a means of circumventing those AI-generated responses. I guess my question is more to do with relationality of discussion boards. I really struggle with them, and I'm not sure if other people do as well. And I realise how difficult this can be in a really big class. Like you said, you had 600 students. Wow, that's amazing. I wonder if the reason I struggle with it, I guess, is because they tend to just be written. And so I've tried in one of my units to use video note to let them hear my voice, to let them see me, and to encourage them to do likewise back. And actually, out of a class of 45, only one chose to do that in this last unit, but she needed to do that because of her particular learning style. Is in your use of discussion boards, is there an opportunity, Tracy, to perhaps encourage that use of alternative ways of communicating?
Yes, I have trialled getting them to use alternative ways. I guess, I don't know if it's just science students or health generally, but they are quite comfortable with the written word.
Yeah.
They kind of veer away from videos and audio. And even when we provide feedback, if I provide feedback audio or videoly, they always just put it in written form. I have found that you often, within 600 students, you'll have a group of students who are really comfortable in that discussion board, and then there are others that are what we call the lurkers. They look at the discussion board, but they don't interact with it. But having said that, talking to students in our research, the fact they lurk, the fact they look at the posts but don't actually respond, it is still informing their learning. So for me, they're optional, they're there as a learning resource, and some of the students just go with it and others just have a look at them, and then others don't even open them at all. But I do actually also use them to provide feedback to students. So I will often provide a lot of generic feedback on their assessments on the discussion board, and that way I'm hoping to encourage them to use them more. But at first year, I'm just trying to get them used to the fact that they could use this and it may be really beneficial to their learning moving forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't like the mandated use of boards at all. I find that, I have some ethical dilemmas with that. But thanks, Tracy. That was a great answer. Thank you very much.
No worries. I think we've had some questions in the post posted in the chat, which I think Kerry's having a go at answering.
There is one. There's a couple here that probably need input. There's one I've answered half of, and then the other half needs to go to you, Ali.
Yeah.
And it's one about. Just got to scroll up a little bit here.
Yeah,
I know.
I'll just, while Kerry's doing that, Bill, with my students, they're third-year students or postgraduate students, and we do have a lot smaller classes, so that makes it, yeah. And with most of them, the first language isn't English. They don't mind that you have to do is part of assessment because they're getting these little small chunks and bites sort of thing. So I suppose to be true, and because it's such a diverse industry, and we've got students that have just come from school, the engagement is there because they're interested in the industry and they've got a short, sharp bite of it. So I'm in a really unique position to find a way to use this and do it successfully. And since I've been doing it, we get great comments. I just put 4 in there, we'd rather do this than an essay. Yeah. But yeah, I admit I don't have 600 students to deal with, so no. So yeah.
To you, Ali, I've answered the second part, I think, but what percentage of ChatGPT do you integrate in discussion?
I've only just started using ChatGPT. I must admit, I got very excited and I literally jumped back from the screen when I saw the first thing come up, sort of thing. So next semester when I'll do this undergraduate student unit, I've just done a postgraduate unit on strategic management. I'll probably be using it within the on-campus class. Probably, I would say, not every workshop. I do workshops, not tutorials. I probably use it. I would say I'll use it probably about 70%. Yeah, for those really conceptual questions. And that one, I deliberately combine 3 modules and you just can't get the answer and you've got to come up with something. So I think at this point, it's an idea generator, and the idea of actually doing that impromptu presentation came from a particularly training director from a port that used to put me on a spot to do something really quickly. So once I started working with the chat, I realised that this could help people to get just an idea generator from that and just push away the whole words that came out and just take those key little ideas and run with them. So really training them to be able to do verbal presentations on the spot. So,
are there any other questions for Tracy, Ellie or Kerry? I noticed there was another query there on the board, Kerry.
This one from Sue.
Yeah.
Do you have any other ideas, experiences to share in the online mode?
With respect to discussion boards?
I would imagine so.
Yeah, I mean, I just continually keep thinking about how I can use them, I guess, and also how I can make them attractive to students, and certainly by the way I title them has certainly been useful. I do also provide an area in my discussion boards where students can just interact with each other, and I don't look at those discussion boards, and they're often, they'll just talk about content or talk about swapping groups and stuff like that. So I think there's lots of opportunities. I think it just depends on the context of your unit and what you're trying to achieve. But if you're trying to achieve an ability for the students to communicate with each other in an online space and also have some communication from the staff, then I think discussion boards can be used. And if you want them to engage regularly, you've got to make that really obvious upfront and really timetable that so the students know when they need to actually go in and do their postings or read postings. So it does take a bit of design and organisation, but I think they can be used effectively in most contexts, but not all contexts.
We might have last call for questions. Any more questions? Okay, we might say thank you very much, Tracy, Ellie and Kerry, for a wonderful, engaging presentation. What a great way to start this evening. Thank you so very much to the 3 of you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to our second presentation for our session this afternoon. A survey-based study for assessing the well-being of educators at University of Brunei Darussalam in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. Marlizayati binti Johari and Siti-14 binti Haji Abdul Latif, both from the University of Brunei Darussalam. Thank you so much for joining us now. We're very much looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Thank you so very much, both of you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Share screen, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen now. Can you all see the screen, our slides?
Yes, we can. That's terrific.
All right. Okay. This particular study, it's a survey-based study where we look into the well-being of educators at University Brunei Darussalam during the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. So just to give context of the study. So in the context of the study, Brunei actually announced early endemic phase on December 2021. However, there was a third wave of COVID-19 outbreak in February 2022. So despite of this event, Brunei still continued with its endemic phase efforts. So with this background, with this context, we decided to look into the well-being of our educators at University Brunei Darussalam during this particular period. And we actually conducted this study. We collected our data during August to September 2022. That is about 4 months, after the third wave of COVID-19 outbreak. And at that time, we were expected to go back to the normal type of teaching, and we are encouraged to do blended learning in our university. So the aim of the study, let me just reiterate, is to assess the well-being of educators against this backdrop, okay? So we actually look at the well-being using the workplace PERMA profiler, and this was developed by Dr. Martin Seligman, and which outlined the 5 main pillars of well-being, which is positive emotion, engagement, positive relationship, meaning, and accomplishment. Along with these 5 pillars, there were also measures of negative emotion as well as health. And this PERMA profiler was based on the positive psychology, the positive psychology branch of psychology. Would you like to add on, Dr. Siti-14, on this?
Just to add on the workplace PERMA profiler, they also recognize that pressure that comes at workplace, the challenges, the burnout, and the demand from workplace. So with this workplace PERMA profiler, it has an added value of items assessing negative emotions as well as loneliness to see whether it can actually tap or correlate with another domain from another measure which looks at negative emotion as well. Yeah, so it's kind of a bonus for using this PERMA profiler.
So in the next slide, we just to elaborate further all these domain, the 5 pillars that was discussed using the PERMA profiler. The first one being the emotions that can range from the positive to the negative. And then there's the engagement part where it refers to whether individual is engaged with the things that they are doing, with the activity that they are doing. And then in terms of relationship is how they are in, what would we call this? Oh, this is the same thing, sorry. I apologize in regards to this. Relationship is more of
looking at the social well-being.
Social well-being, yep. And then the last is the meaning, which refers to the purpose of life. So these are the, and then accomplishment, the ability to work towards reaching to a goals, So this is the 5 pillars of PERMA profiler, but we also look into not just using the PERMA profiler, looking at well-being, we're also using DAS 21, which was developed by Lovibon. And the DAS stands for Depression, Anxiety, Stress Scale. And these have measures in terms of, this is rooted in the clinical psychology, And then these are the scale that they are looking at, the depression scale, anxiety scale, and stress scale. But however, in our study, we actually combining the workplace PERMA profiler and DAS 21 because there are some criticism about the PERMA model where they actually not really specifically looking into the negative emotion and thoughts in its definition of well-being. So with disregarding this complex role of negative emotion, this might limit the idea of as an indicator of a well-being. So that's why we decided to, in this study, we used measured both positive and then negative emotions as well. Okay. And I think the next bit will be my colleague will be taking over. But just to inform you that this study we are looking, it's a two-phase study, but what we are sharing with you is the first phase of the study where we look into the quantitative part of the analysis. And we actually distributed, as I mentioned, we collected the data in August until September 2022. And then we received 39 respondents only. And I think during this time, there's a lot of research going on at the university looking at well-being as well. And also because, the effect of COVID and all that. So I think there are some fatigue in terms of responding to surveys. So I guess that's why our sample size is quite small when the population of the academic staff in UBD is about 300 plus. Yeah. Okay.
So, I think Dr. Marliza, unfortunately, this study would only reflect the sample that were involved in our study. Provided here, you can see quite a fair spread of samples, working years below 5. We've got around 13 of them. We've got 11 working experience from 5 to 10 years, and we've got 15 representing for those working more than 10 years. A total of 39. We've got 16 males and 15 females. The general overall well-being at workplace. This is a graph indicating that the overall well-being of staff was actually rated high. Highest rating point on PERMA is 10. So the responses reported highest in a meaning, which signal a sense of a strong meaning and purpose in their work, as well as a higher rating for engagement, which refers to a state of being fully absorbed, focused, and enthusiastic about one's goal. So this is not surprising to see that higher ratings received for these two areas of well-being, because studies have actually supported that these two are linked very closely. When a person have a good sense of meaning in their work, it means that they perceive that their task and the commitment as something valuable to them. So they are more motivated, they are more engaged, and they're also willing to invest in accomplishing the goals. So meaning, a sense of purpose and engagement really brings up the well-being of individuals if these are both reported to be high. In terms of relationship factor, received the lowest score among the PERMA factor on the scale, but it's still reported to be a high sense of connection and positive relations. So overall, we can see there a range of high for overall and the individual positive factors of PERMA. When we look at the moderate significant relationship between negative emotion and happiness of PERMA, the positive value of using this PERMA model, because it also tapped into negative emotions, and it recognized the presence of stress, challenges, and the demand in the workplace. So it is expected that when an individual rated high negative emotions, we would also anticipate that they would experience less happiness, and that is actually showing in the data. I just want to add on what is not shown in this graph, because I mentioned that it could actually tap into domains. Negative emotion of PERMA could actually tap into domain as well for the DAS measure scale of depression, anxiety, and also stress. It did actually show a correlation. The higher the negative emotion in the PERMA scale, also correlated with the higher domain of this depression, anxiety, as well as stress. So they are actually tapping into the same problem or issues. Level of reported using the DAS scale, depression, anxiety, and stress, using the baseline provided in the scale. So overall, we can say that the level was reported to be moderate for depression, anxiety, and stress, and this should not be looked lightly, because of the next level following moderate is actually severe. So it's just a fine line from moderate to severity of depression, anxiety, and stress. Pearson correlation was also looked into the relationship between those positive domains of PERMA module, as well as the DAS measure for depression, anxiety, and stress. So as expected, the relationship was actually weak to moderate of depression, anxiety, and stress with the general well-being, and for most of the PERMA subscale, especially it says here, the higher the positive emotion, the higher the relationship, the higher the meaning in the purpose of life, the higher the accomplishment and the overall well-being, generally negatively correlated with depression, anxiety, and stress. However, I want to bring attention to the measure of accomplishment in the PERMA model here. As you can see, accomplishment there is actually negatively correlated or negatively related to depression, anxiety, and stress, meaning that the higher the accomplishment or the lower the accomplishment, the higher the depression, anxiety, and stress. That is very common pattern for relationship when we look at data quite a few years back, where resilience was not a topic that was being commonly looked at in terms of this well-being and this measure of scale. But now there has been quite a lot of studies that actually show otherwise, meaning that there is a positive relationship between accomplishment as well as depression, anxiety, and stress. So the higher, it was reported that the higher the stress, depression, and anxiety being reported, the higher the accomplishment rate or level experienced by an individual. So this pretty much a theory explained by experiential positive psychology theory, which says that actually positive psychology could actually benefit. In this case, the accomplishment could actually benefit through the negative emotions. So it serves as an adaptive function more than a maladaptive function in the past. Unfortunately, the study in this case did not indicate the current trends of reporting accomplishment with negative emotion. So perhaps it signals a possibility to look into tapping more resilient among our staff. When we talk about the predictive level in terms of the DAS 21 measure, we only able to predict positive emotion in relation to anxiety and stress, but not depression. And it's only positive emotion and disregarding the rest of the well-being positive factor. So what it says here, for every 1 unit increase in the total positive score, of PERMA, there is a decrease of 0.243 units of level anxiety. So what it means here, the more we actually help to flourish an individual with a lot of positive emotion experiences, the likely that there will be a decrease in the anxiety experience as well. And this is also true for stress, where one unit increase in the total positive score PERMA actually helped to reduce or decrease the stress level by 0.426. So this has implication, while the rest of the positive domain will not tap into the predictive level for DAS, but positive emotion seems to play a key role that we can look into in terms of its implication. The mean score of PERMA by precision, the purpose of showing this graph as well as the arrow bar is to show you that when we draw a line across each of these positive factor, when they meet, when they cut across all the error bar, it means there's no significant difference. So when we do that for each and every positive emotion and overall well-being, it cut across all the 3 error bars in the graph. So obviously, there's no significant differences in PERMA domains across position of educators at the workplace. Yep. I think there's one more today. There's also another slide, I think it's actually missing here. It stays true as well for mean score of DAS, where by precision of educators in the University of Darul Salam, there was a significant difference in terms of them experience, them being a professor, being a lecturer, being an assistant professor. There were no differences in terms of how they experience positive emotion engagement and so on. So the implication of workplace well-being, it stays true that in all literature, it has grown a recognition in prioritizing the well-being of employee or staff at workplace in any context, because studies have proven that when we prioritize the well-being of or the affair of the employee, they would have a lot to offer. They will be more energetic, they will be more resilient, they will be more engaged, and they have a lot and they put their best forward. And this does actually affect, a lot of studies shows increase in job satisfaction level, and then they also have a higher retention rate, and they also improve their work productive level, and they also enhance employee engagement. So they now start to, especially after COVID, it's important to build up the social well-being. And there's also a reduce in burnout and stress. But all of this is with one objective. It stays true that the more we provide the positive and flourishing experience to different pathway, it will actually help to better the experiences of our employee and the well-being. There's actually a whole list of ways of pathway of supporting well-being of staff. So I've provided here 4, which I think we could consider in the context of University Budaya Darus Salam. The flexible working arrangement is something that has been promoted, especially in higher education, because not only now we look into blended learning, but there's also an interesting study which highlighted the importance of remote learning. That study shows that remote learning actually indeed reduce the psychological and physical stress of employee. However, full remote learning means fully working from home, actually putting at risk for low work productivity. Or in other words, it's actually decreasing the presentism or being present in actual workplace. So the conclusion of that study says it's important to have a good balance between remote as well as physical space, because social emotional well-being still require that contact, that social aspect of development. Mental health support, in terms of mental health support, when it was being studied during the pandemic to the endemic phase, there were a lot of studies which look at the medical staff in the medical context, in the hospital, because these are the people who are very occupied and very prominent at the time of this crisis when it happened. So a lot of study were looking into building or tapping into the mental health of these people. So, but studies have continued to show that regardless in any context, providing support in terms of coping strategies, as well as the social support in terms of feeling connectedness, feeling a sense of belonging, as well as psychological resilience, all of this prove to actually help and benefit in terms of resources that individuals can draw into for their growth and positive experiences. In terms of strength and best approach, there were quite a lot of study which now looks into, for example, using this measure PERMA scale as a sign of looking and inform staff or individual what are their strengths and whether that can be worked with collectively in terms of holistic development, or it could be a tailored kind of strength that focus on a specific level. So there are also things which a lot of people look into, for example, teaching the growth mindset is very popular nowadays as well. There are other things like building resilience, as well as looking into being mindful in the workplace, and also teaching skills not only to younger kids, but I think there's a popular demand in teaching acknowledging gratitude, so you become grounded and you become more appreciative, not only just accepting to life, not only embracing and accepting life, but also at the face of adversity, you are able to be resilient. Another interesting point to share, the final point here, is the physical workspace. I find this study quite interesting. There's a lot of initiative, I think in not only in school, but also in higher education, in terms of the internal design of the facilities, as well as the building, which is trying to cater for students as well as for staff. So there's a study which looks at the support in terms of workplace environment, which says that when looking into support such as providing the amenities such as a sit and standing desk, as well as a treadmill table. I tried that. It works, but not for strength exercise, just for casual reading. And also another pointer was using a high desk kind of chair that actually help to promote a physical activity more than being a sedentary life, because quite common here in the academic lifestyle, we tend to sit too long, we tend to stare too long at the computer. So I think that doing a lot of step actually counts. So at a workplace level, they look into providing amenities like a gym and so on. I think that's all for our presentation. We welcome question, or we welcome also to hear what kind of initiative actually that other universities from other countries are actually looking into to supporting the well-being stuff that we could actually leverage on as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's our references.
Thank you so very, very much, our colleagues from Brunei there. What an interesting presentation. I'll open it up for questions, but I'd like to just start by noting there was some really interesting points towards the end of your presentation about active work. And we have a colleague, Scott Peterson, Dr. Scott Peterson, who runs the Active Work Lab here in Launceston, who has been engaged with various organisations such as Tasmania Police in activating people through standing desks and through doing action and exercise whilst we're working. So really interesting. Thanks so much to both of you. Let's hear some questions.
Thank you, Peter. You've got a question?
Please just chime in with a question. No need to raise your hand.
Okay. Measurement of happy working environment. There's one question here about the measuring tool that we actually use. PERMA, the measurement of happy working environment. We are using the workplace, our PERMA profiler. So they are looking into things like a positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning as well as accomplishment. But on site, there are a few questions that tap into negative emotion as well as happiness. There are three items which looks at happiness. So it's more of a general capture of happiness in the workplace. So it's not just PERMA is not just measuring a happy working environment, but they actually tap into asking that question as well.
Okay. In June 2020.
Yep. And where am I? This? Hold on. I think they were mostly comments. More than question. Yeah.
We're going through the chat box. We raise any questions.
Can I just ask something quickly? We're doing some research with young people who are musicians, who are amateur musicians, who are playing in orchestras. And one of the things we've been investigating is resilience and the ways in which playing music can improve resilience, but in the sense of a social ecology of the organisation that helps to build that resilience, not in a blaming sense of the individual. So it's very interesting. I can see some really great connections to the PERMA profiling. And I've had a look at it online. Is it possible to adjust the PERMA profile and change it from workplace to another environment, or is that not allowed?
I know it's there is some consent, the consent that you need to fill a form when actually apply using this. Yeah, but I'm sure Professor Seligman would actually welcome through a personal initiative or context, and I'm sure he would be happy to see how that can translate in a different context. Yeah, it will be interesting to see through music, because I recently enrolled my kid to music classes, and they decided to pick on violin. I hope that can actually help them, because my oldest actually now are doing going to sit for a big exam. So I see she's going through a lot of pressure. So I said, you want to join music class? So it's interesting what you just brought in. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. Yeah. Peter, you mentioned just now that there's a lab that's actually being initiated by a professor at the workplace in terms of the sitting and standing exercises. Did you participate for that?
I don't, but many of my colleagues do. It's actually about getting a reminder to do exercise, to get yourself up from your seat and do things.
Yeah.
It's Professor Scott Peterson. I'm sure Vin would be able to provide you with his contact information. Yeah.
Great. I'll look into that. Yeah. I think it's reminding us to do a little bit of stretch. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any more questions for our colleagues?
No, I don't see any more questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I might hand back to Vin. Thank you to all of our presenters today. What a great session. Over to you, Vin.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you so much for your help sharing the two sessions today beautifully. And thank you so much to all the fabulous presenters, Tracy, Alison, Carrie, Siti, and sorry, where's the next name? My apologies, and where's the next name? I'm fighting. It look like
Marlizayati.
Marlizayati. Yep. Some people disappear from my screen. Okay, thank you so much everyone for joining the session today. There is a lot of interest in the two topics, wonderful topics. The role of discussion board in online education. We realize a lot on the discussion board in our online teaching HU task. So it is a very extremely important topic, and thank you so much for your fantastic research about that, Tracy, Alison, about ChatGPT, and Carrie. And if you have any more resources to share with the participant in the forum, please send through to me. So tomorrow morning I can share, or later this week when you have time, I can share with the participant. And the same for you, YouTube presenter Sita and Marlizayati. If you would like to share some reading, etc., and please send them to me. Thank you very much again, everyone, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.